will speak in French, so if you want to put your hearing. OK. Tout d'abord, merci de votre présence et merci à tous ceux qui ont participé à l'organisation de cette conférence importante. Importante parce que c'est un nouveau règlement contrôle qui est en train de se préparer. Et comme j'ai l'habitude de le dire, il n'y a pas de politique efficace s'il n'y a pas de contrôle efficace sur le respect de la réglementation. Et donc, c'est ce que nous essayons de faire sur la proposition de la Commission au sein du Parlement. Et bien évidemment, les parlementaires que nous sommes sont très curieux et très intéressés par tout ce que nos orateurs pourront dire. Je voudrais pour commencer resituer ce que sont les objectifs de cette nouvelle réglementation contrôle, en tout cas de mon point de vue. Madame la représentante de la DG Marais vous direz sans doute quels sont les objectifs du point de vue de la Commission. Mais pour ce qui est du Parlement, en dehors, comme je viens de le dire, d'une efficacité du contrôle pour le respect de la réglementation, nous avons d'autres objectifs, l'efficacité du respect de la politique commune des pêches. Et en premier lieu, alors je vais aller très vite, il y a trois objectifs de mon point de vue. Trois objectifs majeurs. Le premier objectif, c'est l'harmonisation dans l'ensemble de l'Union européenne du contrôle des pêches. Pourquoi? Parce que le précédent règlement contrôle avait la fâcheuse habitude de laisser, mine de rien, aux États membres un certain nombre d'interprétations avec toute une série de conditionnels, les États membres, MEPs, coudes, Cannes, bref, toute une série de termes conditionnels qui finalement permettaient à chacun des États membres d'apprécier l'interprétation du contrôle. Et les conséquences, alors ça pourrait comme ça paraître après tout pas plus mal d'avoir une forme de flexibilité dans les termes, sauf que la concrétisation de ce conditionnel aboutissait à ce que les pêcheurs aient l'impression que le contrôle était différent sur l'ensemble de l'Union européenne et que, j'ai l'habitude de dire, l'eau était plus bleue de l'autre côté de leurs eaux territoriales et qu'ils n'étaient pas soumis partout à la même rigueur, à la même efficacité du contrôle. Et ça crée, et je peux vous dire, pour avoir fait le tour de plusieurs ports, de beaucoup de ports européens, ça crée un sentiment d'injustice, d'inéquité, et l'idée que finalement, on a une réglementation, une politique commune des pêches, mais qui n'a pas partout la même application. Et donc, la nécessité d'harmoniser se faisait sentir de manière forte parce que le sentiment d'injustice, le sentiment d'inéquité a aussi pour conséquence une forme de mauvaise justification du non-respect de la réglementation. Et donc, plus on aura une harmonisation de la réglementation, plus on aura une bonne acceptation de la réglementation et de sa mise en œuvre. Donc la question de l'harmonisation est très importante. La question de la simplification aussi, parce que vous savez, parfois, malheureusement, on n'aboutira pas, et j'en parlerai, à une simplification suffisante de ce règlement, parce qu'il aurait fallu, Madame la représentante de la DG Marais, mais il aurait fallu tout réécrire. Mais parfois, on a un peu l'impression qu'on est, vous savez, dans ces livres jeux de rôle, où quand on commence l'histoire, on nous envoie un coup à la page 56, un coup à la page 322, retour à la page 60. Bref, ces livres de jeux de rôle pour les enfants et les adolescents qui finalement ne nous donnent pas une bonne lisibilité, une facilité d'accès à la réglementation, en tout cas à son application. Donc la question de la simplification est aussi posée. Et puis il y a un troisième objectif dont on va, je crois, beaucoup parler, celui de la fiabilité et de l'analyse, avant l'analyse d'ailleurs, l'agrégation, l'analyse, bref, le traitement des données, qui est aussi un élément important quand on veut définir une politique publique. Si on n'a pas les données nécessaires, eh bien, on risque de passer à côté des problèmes, et c'est un peu le sentiment que l'on a eu à travers, avec la mise en œuvre de ce règlement contrôle et de la politique des pêches en général. Donc, la fiabilité des données, je viens de le dire, est le seul moyen d'avoir un état des lieux précis, et son analyse qui permettra de réorienter ou au contraire de conforter les politiques mises en œuvre. D'ailleurs, je tiens à le dire, je n'y ai pensé que trop tard, donc je ne peux pas revenir avec des amendements, encore qu'on peut peut-être le faire en plénière, on verra. Mais le règlement contrôle aurait pu s'appeler règlement contrôle et données, ou règlement contrôle et collecte des données. Ça aurait permis d'ailleurs d'avoir pour ce règlement une vision un peu différente qu'une simple vision punitive du contrôle, mais au contraire une vision positive, puisque la collecte des données, finalement, c'est positif pour se réorienter dans nos politiques. Donc, on verra. Peut-être que j'essaierai de changer son nom en plénière pour donner cette vision positive du règlement contrôle et données. Alors on va commencer par, je vais commencer par, avant de vous donner la parole pour développer un petit peu l'ensemble de ces trois points. D'abord sur la fiabilité des données, clairement, c'est ce qui justifie de mon point de vue deux choses. L'une que nous partageons avec la Commission et l'autre qu'il nous faudra discuter avec la Commission. Ce que nous partageons avec la Commission, c'est que la déclaration électronique sur l'ensemble des navires, c'est-à-dire y compris les moins de 12 mètres, est absolument nécessaire, puisque si l'on regarde la flottille, on a 82 000 navires environ sur les eaux européennes, et sur ces 82 000 navires, 70 000 font moins de 12 mètres, et donc si on ne peut pas traiter, et c'est ce qui se passe aujourd'hui, les données papier de ces 70 000 navires, si on n'arrive pas à agréger ces données, si on n'arrive pas à les traiter, alors on se prive de l'essentiel des données et on ne peut pas avoir une politique en adéquation avec la réalité de la pêche en Europe. Donc la question de la déclaration électronique des moins de 12 mètres est tout à fait nécessaire en vue de cette collecte, cette fiabilité des données en notre possession. Deuxième élément, sur ce point on aura sûrement une discussion puisque ce n'était pas la proposition de la Commission, nous pensons que l'agence de contrôle des pêches est la mieux à même d'agréger et d'analyser ces données, d'abord parce que c'est leur métier, ensuite parce que, alors évidemment pas forcément avec les moyens qu'elle a, on verra ça après, d'abord parce que c'est leur métier sur le plan technique, et ensuite parce que nous pensons qu'il faut centraliser en un lieu compétent pour ce faire, qui a toutes les compétences et tous les moyens pour cette analyse. Alors ça nécessite bien sûr plein de choses, un format unique, mais ça là-dessus on est d'accord avec la Commission, mais des moyens supplémentaires évidemment pour l'agence de contrôle des pêches qui aujourd'hui n'a pas du tout les moyens, mais pas plus que la DG Marée, pardon de vous le dire, de ce point de vue, il faudra de toute façon des données supplémentaires, que ceux-ci soient attribués à la DG Marée ou qu'ils soient attribués à l'agence de contrôle. Ce n'est pas vrai qu'on peut agréger, traiter, analyser des données sans moyens humains, en tout cas pour l'instant, peut-être qu'un jour il n'y aura plus du tout de travail humain et que les machines feront tout, mais enfin à ce stade de notre vie politique et de notre civilisation, on a encore besoin de moyens humains. Ensuite, deuxième point sur la simplification, cette fois-ci, sur la simplification, j'attire votre attention, il ne faut pas que ce nouvel objectif soit à la charge à la charge économique et financière des pêcheurs à qui on a déjà beaucoup chargé la barque, c'est le cas de le dire, ces dernières années. Et donc, il faut pour ce faire, en tout cas pour les moins de 12 mètres, des outils très simples, des déclarations très simples, des formulaires très simples, un logiciel d'une simplicité enfantine, sur smartphone, puisque tout le monde a un smartphone, ne pas les obliger à avoir d'autres outils, d'autant qu'on s'adresse à de petites embarcations, parfois à très petites embarcations, qui n'ont pas forcément d'habitacle et à qui on ne va donc pas demander des moyens électroniques surdimensionnés. Et donc le smartphone est un très bon outil. Il y a déjà plusieurs pays d'ailleurs sur certaines côtes qui l'utilisent, donc nous pensons que c'est la bonne solution. Et en tout état de cause, l'objectif est quand même d'éviter les complications pour les pêcheurs. De ce point de vue, je tiens à dire d'ailleurs que c'est sûrement plus simple qu'une déclaration papier, contrairement à ce que j'ai entendu et qui est quand même l'obligation actuelle. De même d'ailleurs, ça sera le cas pour la surveillance, enfin le monitoring, surveillance, je dirais, géographique, géolocalisée, pardon, je vais y arriver, de la pêche. Pour les moins de 12 mètres, il faudra aussi des moyens différents, enfin moins coûteux et plus simples que ceux qui sont exigés pour les plus de 12 mètres. Et puis, autre proposition, mais je vais très vite, une proposition que nous avons au Parlement travaillé avec l'Agence de contrôle des pêches, qui est un accès pour les pêcheurs à un site simplifié et en temps réel pour les capitaines, afin qu'ils puissent connaître en temps réel, sur le lieu de pêche, les droits, obligations, interdictions et autres qui leur sont dévolus en fonction du lieu, de leurs engins, de la période, etc., etc. Et l'Agence de contrôle des pêches est prête, tout à fait prête à mettre en œuvre ce type d'outils. Enfin, je terminerai avec l'harmonisation, qui est de mon point de vue un des points centraux du rapport, comme je l'ai déjà évoqué. L'idée, comme je le disais, est de recréer la crédibilité du règlement contrôle qui aujourd'hui laisse, comme je le disais, une grande part à l'interprétation au niveau national, au niveau des États membres, et qui suscite ce sentiment, parfois d'ailleurs un sentiment qui n'est pas forcément légitime, mais en tout cas qui est un ressenti puissant et dévastateur d'inéquité et d'injustice. Enfin, réduire pour ce faire les marges de manœuvre des États membres. Je sais que ça ne va pas faire l'unanimité avec le Conseil non plus, mais bon, nous sommes trois institutions, nous devons discuter toutes les trois, nous aurons parfois des désaccords avec la Commission et des accords avec la Commission et parfois avec le Conseil. Tout ceci doit se faire en bonne intelligence. Voilà pour l'introduction. Donc, et bien sûr, alors nous avons un vote en commission de la pêche sur le FEAMP à 14 h, donc nous ne pourrons pas avec et les mesures techniques et la fameuse pêche électrique dans les mesures techniques que je ne veux absolument pas manquer, n'est-ce pas Ricardo? J'imagine toi non plus. Et donc nous serons obligés de vous quitter à 14 h, mais vous pourrez continuer à poser des questions aux intervenants à ce moment-là. Voilà, donc tout de suite je vais passer la parole au prochain speaker, donc Nicolas Fernand. First speaker, oui. Sorry. Ah, je n'ai pas le bon, pardon. Alors, c'est celui-là, je l'ai là. Ok, très bien, heureusement que vous êtes là. Nous avons d'abord un film sur la petite pêche côtière et le suivi, justement géolocalisé de la petite pêche côtière. Et donc, je ne sais pas techniquement comment... Ah, j'ai oublié un truc très important, pardon. Je dois mentionner à tous les participants l'hashtag de cette réunion, pour ceux qui voudraient en profiter. Donc c'est hashtag Fisheries Control, ou alors j'arrive pas à lire, hashtag 100 Watch, c'est ça? IUU Watch. IUU, ah sorry, IUU Watch, ok. Voilà les deux hashtags pour cette réunion. Et donc maintenant le film, je crois. Non, vous présentez le film d'abord.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madame Thomas, for your introduction, and that has, of course, already touched on a number of the important issues that we will go into more detail today with the help of our speakers. And yes, you're right, the video is going to be the first thing. But ladies and gentlemen, members of the European Parliament, the European Commission, permanent representatives and interested stakeholders, so everyone who has made it here today, on behalf of a coalition of NGOs, so that is Oceana, the Pew Charitable Trusts, WWF, Client Earth, the Fisheries Secretariat, Our Fish, Seas at Risk, and the Environmental Justice Foundation, which I'm representing. On behalf of this coalition of NGOs, we would like to also welcome you to this event here today. And we want to express our sincere thanks to Madame Thomas and Mr. Serrão for agreeing to host this event. And likewise, we'd also like to thank the Intergroup on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development for kindly agreeing to help with the organization of this event. And in terms of thanks, the last thing I want to say, a special thanks also to Funding Fish, whose generous financial support has allowed us to plan and ultimately today hold this event. Now, for all those seated, there is, of course, interpretation in Spanish and French. And for everyone else who didn't catch one of the seats with interpretation, I hope you will still be able to follow along. And yes, so just so everybody knows, the event is being live streamed and also recorded, so you can watch it later on, just so everybody is aware. And I just want to say we've mentioned the hashtags, so it's hashtag Fisheries Control and hashtag IUU Watch for illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, IUU Watch. If anybody out there listening is on Twitter and wants to tweet a question for later on for the discussion, then you can do so using these two hashtags, and then we'll try and even maybe bring in some people from the Twitter sphere. Now, with the help of this event, we as a coalition of NGOs aim to create a fruitful platform for exchange between different stakeholders on the various aspects which the revision of the control regulation touches upon. All, of course, with the goal to have a strong new EU fisheries control system through fully documented fisheries, as the title says. Now, during today's event, our speakers will address traceability and why it's important that fish imports into the EU market should meet the same criteria as those products produced in the EU. We will also hear about the control of EU waters by those whose daily job it is, and why quality data and seamless information exchange is crucial for effective monitoring and control. We will also thereafter hear from the European Commission, providing a statement on the revision of the control regulation. And as Madame Thomas said, then we'll have a round of question and answers. And everyone who doesn't have to vote at 2 is, of course, welcome to stay. All I can say is we have the room until 3 o'clock, I believe, so we can keep going if everyone is still okay. So, and now, all right, to start off with, we turn to small-scale fisheries and the question of how to achieve better monitoring and data collection for small-scale fishes. As Madame Thomas just highlighted, the small-scale vessel sector is an important sector in the EU, representing 85% of all fishing vessels and 23% of total catches. So the thing is, voluntary tracking systems have been in place for a number of years in some areas and with great success. And before we will hear from our first speaker today, Mr. Nicolas Fernandez-Munoz, we would like to begin with a short film that was specifically made for this event on small-scale vessel monitoring, and it will highlight why the system in place in the region in Spain of Andalusia has been such a success story, and it demonstrates that voluntary schemes for monitoring of small-scale vessels and catch reporting is currently possible, certainly so in the future, and it is helpful for the sector, so for the fishers, for control authorities, but also ultimately for consumers, and it should therefore be extended to all EU waters. And now I'd like for the film to commence.
Muy claro, es importante porque el futuro está ahí. Aquí como se mantenga lo que es la pesquería, esto va en decadencia, esto año tras año va cayendo y es algo que es abismal. normal, lo estamos viendo estos últimos años, que cada vez la pesca va cayendo más. Y como no le pongamos un remedio, aquí no hay futuro. Esto está claro que en vuelta de 10 años o 15 esto está todo perdido.
Porque para nosotros el medio es lo más importante. Sin ese medio no tenemos especies. Y sin especies no podemos vivir. ¿A quién le interesa de verdad que tengamos pesquería? Al sector pesquero.
In 2004, the regional government of Andalusia invited small-scale fishing boats to voluntarily install electronic monitoring systems on board, which are currently not mandatory under EU law. Today, 97% of the local fleet in Andalusia has been equipped with electronic monitoring systems, referred to as green boxes. The green box is a device that uses the mobile network to send information about positions, course and speed to the Fisheries Control Centre every 3 minutes. This allows authorities to track vessel movements in real time.
Pues mira, esta herramienta, como te he dicho, la Consejería la implantó con esos 3 objetivos: control, estudio de caladeros, gestión y el tema de seguridad marítima. Pero claro, el sector tiene aquí una herramienta fundamental, y más ahora que tanto se habla de autogestión, cogestión, ¿sabes? Entonces, en ese sentido, todos los datos que aporta la caja verde, que obviamente se procesan aquí en la Dirección General, son unas bases de datos inmensas de datos.
The green boxes provide invaluable data for improving fisheries management, deterring illegal fishing and ensuring the safety of workers at sea.
Y de hecho, pues mira, tenemos aquí los informes que le vamos sacando, y como tú puedes ver, pues, aquí se ven pues, los mapas de caladeros de las distintas especies. Obviamente esto es una información muy valiosa para nosotros como gestores de las pesquerías, pero también para ellos, porque ellos son copartícipes de la gestión.
Bueno, la caja verde de la Junta de Andalucía tiene un gran potencial para poder trabajar, estar controlado todos los barcos. Es una buena herramienta de trabajo para la pesca, porque desde Sevilla se puede controlar todo el Golfo de Cádiz.
La caja verde de por sí yo creo que es el mejor instrumento que tenemos ahora mismo para poder aplicarlo en las pesquerías costeras artesanales. En las pesquerías de pequeña escala yo creo que es el instrumento más adecuado. No tengo ninguna duda al respecto.
Simple, cost and energy efficient monitoring systems like the Green Box could help small-scale fisheries across Europe and around the world manage their resources and keep fishers safe.
So if I could just quickly say, there is the video on ruuwatch.eu as well, if you want to re-watch it, maybe so you don't have to stand up and watch it for some here in the room, but you can sit down and enjoy it. And there's also a Spanish version of this film, a fully Spanish one. And now hearing from the man that you've just seen and heard in the video, going into more detail, Nicholas, if I may please ask you to give your presentation.
Gracias, George. Buenas tardes y disculpad las prisas de última hora. Como lo primero de todo es vale, ahora. Lo primero es situaros, habéis visto el vídeo, y un poco es situaros donde nos encontramos: Europa, España, el estrecho de Gibraltar, para que no se os olvide nunca dónde estamos, frente al continente africano, y ahí a un margen os pongo un área que es el área donde fundamentalmente trabaja la flota de pequeña escala de Conil. En ese área vienen a trabajar en torno a 115 barcos profesionales, de los cuales un 85% son barcos de pequeña escala, luego se reparten el 15% barcos de cerco procedentes de Barbate y algunos barcos de arrastre procedentes de otros puertos del Golfo de Cádiz. Pero voy a lo que realmente me interesa hoy comentaros. El sistema de control en Andalucía, acorde con el reglamento, que se refiere a las cajas verdes. Lo he dicho antes, es un sistema sencillo, pero que contiene más de una función. Sirve de control de la flota, de seguimiento de la flota, y también tiene algo especial, y es que pulsando con un pulsador se pone en marcha todo el sistema de emergencia ante un peligro que pueda existir para la flota. De por sí puede servir solo para el control desde el punto de vista de la administración, pero para nosotros esta herramienta, unida con otra herramienta para nosotros fundamental, que es el IDAPES, es una herramienta donde se aglutina toda la estadística pesquera de las lonjas, pues eso nos da la posibilidad de poder hacer una magnífica planificación en la gestión de las pesquerías, porque obtiene una información absolutamente importante para ello, ¿no? En su día nosotros este coste no tuvo coste adicional. Se implantó gracias a los fondos estructurales. Dentro de un rato, habéis dicho, la señora Thomas ha dicho que tienen votaciones. Yo lo que sí os pido a los europarlamentarios que haya por acá, que tengáis muy en consideración a dónde aplicáis los fondos en el próximo periodo. Dos cuestiones. Una, ¿dónde aplicáis los fondos? ¿A dónde los dirigís? Esta es una buena fórmula de aplicar los fondos. Y dos, establecer criterios que sean posibles que podamos obtenerlos, porque si no los podemos obtener, todo lo que hagáis no va a valer para nada. Dicho esto, ya que el Pisuerga pasaba por Valladolid, pues no viene mal para que lo tengáis en cuenta. Deciros que este sistema hoy controla a más de 1.200 embarcaciones de pesca artesanal en Andalucía. ¿Pero qué aplicaciones puede tener las cajas verdes? ¿Por qué tengo yo tanto empeño en defender la importancia de las cajas verdes que tenemos implantadas en Andalucía? Mirad, a nosotros el tener la información, cuando solicitamos en el 2006 que se nos colocaran de manera voluntaria, porque solo se aplicaba al marisqueo y a un plan de pesca especial para el voraz, para el besugo, en el estrecho de Gibraltar, para la flota de Tarifa de Algeciras, nos venía muy bien conocer qué podíamos obtener de ahí. Y en ese uso con la herramienta del IDAPES pudimos poner en marcha algo que para nosotros es fundamental y seguimos pidiendo y siguen sin autorizar el Gobierno de España, que es un área protegida de interés pesquero, un área marina protegida de interés pesquero en la zona nuestra, de entre Cabo Trafalgar y el islote de Santipetri. A partir de ahí, los pescadores entendieron la importancia de volver a recuperar una organización fundamental que desde luego ahora está teniendo un papel mucho más importante, que son las OPP, las organizaciones de productores pesqueros. Y la organización de productores pesqueros nuestra, desde luego, los planes de producción y comercialización no serían posibles o no serían igualmente entendibles si no tuviésemos esta herramienta, estas herramientas, la información que viene de esta herramienta. No quiero dejar pasar la oportunidad de deciros, en Europa nos preocupa mucho, nos preocupa demasiado el control, y es bueno que nos preocupe, pero desde luego nos quedamos muy miopes si solo miramos el control a la flota de pequeña escala y nos olvidamos de una acción emergente en los últimos 20 años, que es la flota recreativa, a la que parece que nadie le está echando cuenta, pero que tiene una incidencia fundamental en nuestros caladeros y que tiene una incidencia fundamental también, de una u otra manera, en un mercado oscuro que se crea al margen del comercio legal que se hace con los productos de la pesca. Señores, 115 embarcaciones profesionales. Los datos de 2016 oficiales me arrojaban que en el mismo espacio operaban más de 1.600 embarcaciones recreativas. Ustedes decidme a mí a dónde queréis llevar el control realmente. Y para que os veáis una idea del potencial de las cajas verdes, os voy a poner algunos ejemplos. Un ejemplo como este, ¿no? donde podemos medir, el esfuerzo pesquero acumulado por hora, donde podemos medir también el esfuerzo pesquero por hora, pero mensualmente, para saber cómo es esa incidencia de ese esfuerzo pesquero, donde podemos medir el promedio de euros kilo, es decir, vamos a valorar cómo estamos pescando y el valor que tiene, y lo puedes sacar de ahí. Fijaros si es importante. Y también podemos ver las capturas kilos hora. Hasta eso podemos llegar. Es por poner un ejemplo. Podría poner otras diapositivas también de pantallazos donde vemos la importancia de este instrumento. Y como el tiempo nos apremia y quiero dar paso a todos los demás, pues vamos a las conclusiones. Las conclusiones para mí son muy sencillas. Para mí yo creo que el control desde luego de las cajas verdes son efectivas, es un instrumento importantísimo. Lo he dicho antes en el vídeo, lo vuelvo a decir. Para mí, para la pequeña escala, es absolutamente fundamental. Otros tipos con otros tipos de herramientas tienen múltiples funciones que son absolutamente importantes. Yo creo también, por otra parte, que es un instrumento súper eficaz, que no debemos de dejar de utilizarlo y de implantarlo, que tenemos que orientar ahí los fondos para los próximos periodos y, desde luego, no equivoquemos nunca nuestra mirada. No solo flota costera artesanal, la flota recreativa no dejármela de lado porque nos estaremos equivocando. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Nous avons déjà pris 10 minutes de retard, donc on va essayer de rattraper légèrement. Sur la... Vous voulez présenter? Oui, as you want.
Yeah, so just to keep things short, on the issue of traceability now, if I may ask Mr. Daniel Vothers from PECH to give this presentation.
Thank you very much for the introduction, the presentation. Thank you to the Intergroup and Coalition of MEPs for the invite. So I'll be addressing traceability of fish products in the European market. In order to give some facts and figures, I think it's useful for you to see what we produce in the European Union first. So annually, the European fishing fleet is providing around 5 million tons of fish, which is more or less 5% of the world catch. And concerning the imports, we import in 9 million tons, which represent more or less 24% of global import. So as you can see, we are importing up to 60 or over 60% of seafood products into the European market every year. Concerning the top 5 species, we have 5 of them that you can see in the slide. And they represent more or less 43% of the market, and most of them are imported from non-EU countries. From a legal point of view, if we look at the common fisheries policy, what is the common fisheries policy telling us about imports? First, if we go to recital number 12, one of the aims is to reduce the market dependence on food imports. If we look at Article 35 on the market organization, of course, we need to have sound and consistent data on the origin of the products. Article 36 refers to control. Of course, we need to have an effective and efficient union fisheries control system. And finally, concerning the objectives, we need to create a level playing field. That was already introduced by George. We need to compete under similar circumstances. Building on this idea on the level playing field, EU fisheries policies, they must ensure that imported products, they comply with the same requirements as the products that we produce as the fishing industry in the European Union. As we can see, we have different examples that are showing us that uneven standards are being applied to EU and non-EU fishing vessels, as well as EU products from non-EU products. So we see different differences in these scenarios, and I'll show in the next slide. So as Madame Thomas said at the beginning of the presentation, of course, we need to have an harmonized control system in the European Union that is applicable throughout the whole chain, regardless of the origin of the product. So what needs to be changed in practice? First, I would refer to the control and IUU regulation. And for us, then, first of all, it's really useful to have this unique vessel identifier system in place in the European Union. It is already a reality thanks to the control regulation. So for vessels over a certain capacity, or GTs, and for vessels over a certain size, it is mandatory in the European Union. And of course, it has a lot of consequences. For instance, now that Brexit is really in the media. In case there's a hard Brexit, if they want to fish in our waters, in European waters, they would need to have an IMO number. In RFMOs, in regional fisheries management organizations, this is also mandatory for certain vessels, depending, again, on the size and the capacity. So opposite to the EU vessels, but for us this is mandatory. This is not mandatory for non-EU vessels when they are supplying their catches into our markets, because it's not mandatory under the catch certification scheme. And from our point of view, and I'm also sure that is the view of many others, the inclusion of the IMO number in the catch certificate would provide many benefits, being the first one to assistance of member states in checking and verifying the legality and also the origin. Also ensure that vessels, they have the same requirements regardless of their nationality. Also guarantee compliance with the RFMO measures and requirements. And finally, we need to bear in mind that a lot of imports are coming from large fishing vessels from outside the European Union. So there's an easy fix. We just need to go to the IUU regulation Annex 2, where it's established the catch certificate, and just amend these two squares and make the IMO number mandatory and compulsory. Continuing with the control and IUU regulation, and opposite to imports, we see that EU fishing vessels, we need to provide a lot of information, and this information is stored in the logbook. With the new European Commission proposal to revise the control regulation, it's going to be aligned with a unique fishing trip identifier. And we see that fishing industry, we need to provide accurate information about the origin of the product. And also, when we fish outside the European Union waters, we need to undergo a lot of bureaucracy in order to prove that the fish is European. And in order to do so, we need to provide certificates like the T2M, health certificate, and also pass our fish through border inspection post. Sorry. Concerning the Common Market Organization regulation, it also requires a high level of precision concerning the fish areas, sub-areas, and divisions. This is not happening yet in the IUU regulation, which only refers to big FAO areas. So again, how do we fix the problem? Now in the slide you can see the new control regulation proposal by the Commission in Article 58, which refers to traceability of lots of fishery products. We believe that with a couple of amendments, or with one amendment, tabling a couple of paragraphs, we can solve this problem. One, by making a strong reference to the area and subdivision, and second, to the IMO number. Now that we're talking about lots, we see also that in the new Commission proposal, it will be not allowed to mix the lots after the placing in the market. Well, we understand that fishing processors, they need to mix the lots in order to, for instance, produce surimi. So it could pose a problem to processing industry not to mix different lots from different species and different areas. But from a fishing industry perspective, this should be permitted as long as traceability is guaranteed. Concerning the digitalization of the IUU catch certificate, we fully support this. I think it's a good idea, but of course it needs to work in practice. So the Commission needs to make sure that the system is well coordinated and harmonized in member states. Otherwise, we will continue having a shift in trade flows. And it has to be, the Commission needs to ensure that the interoperability of the IT systems with regards to the catch certificate. And of course, EFCA can play a fundamental role not only in the European Union but outside the European Union with the operational coordination. Changing the subject, marketing standards. Now the European Commission is evaluating 4 different regulations that you can see, well, you can barely read in the upper part of the slides. And as you can see, some of these regulations, they are more than 20 years old, so they need to be at least updated. And calculations provided by DG Mare show that the current marketing standards that normally refer to freshness and size of the product, when it comes to imports, this is only applicable to 10% compared to 75% of EU products. We also believe as fishing industry that marketing standards should go beyond the product quality in order to allow higher standards to be considered. For instance, the social standards that we have now in the directive that is implemented 2188. Also, branding and trade names may not correspond to the scientific name in preserved products. And we have this case in bonito and tuna, but also I can show you here a can that the content is a sprat, but then when we see the trade name, it refers to herring and also to anchovy. So it's really confusing not only for the operator business to business, but also to the consumer. And now that I'm talking about the consumer information, of course, we as fishing industry, we need to provide a lot of information, being, for instance, the fish species, the production area, the method, and including the fishing gear. And this information is going to pass through the final consumer. And, but for prepared, preserved, and processed products, this is not mandatory information, as you can see in the slide below. So if the consumer is not receiving this information, of course, traceability is not ensured throughout the supply chain. And for the European fishing industry, this is creating a problem because we need to provide the added value of our products because we believe that in the European Union we have really high standards. But if the consumer, they don't know where the product is coming from, then for the importers, they don't really care much about the origin of the product. And for that, I mean, as a consequence, we need to meet lower standards and prices. So that is not the aim of the Common Fisheries Policy. And again, we have an easy fix. If we go to the Common Market Organization regulation in Article 35, we just need to add a couple of points in order to include prepared and preserved fish. Finally, on the international dimension, when the European Union is negotiating and signing free trade agreements with third countries, of course, we need to make sure that in these agreements there are reinforced chapters on sustainable fisheries. We didn't see so when the European Union signed the agreement with Japan and Vietnam. They only have weak commitments to sustainability. And also there has to be a consistency with the IUU policy because, for instance, when the European Union was negotiating the agreement with Philippines on GSP Plus and with South Korea on the free trade agreement, these countries, they were identified by the European Commission as not compliant with the IUU regulation. Concerning tariff preferences, the ATQs, the autonomous tariff quotas, this should be granted as well in case the country where the fish product is coming from, they have standards guaranteeing the sustainability of the fisheries, because otherwise we are permitting the entrance of unsustainable products in the European market. And just to give you an idea how much product is benefiting from this scheme, well, up to 750,000 tons every 2 years are benefiting from this system. Finally, when it comes to the IUU policy, we also believe that it has to be better aligned with the labor policy. We have the ILO C188, Work and Fishing Convention, and now the European Commission has lifted the yellow card of Thailand. We see that a lot of NGOs and trade unions still identified labor abuse in this country. Take-home message, seafood imported into the European Union, they must comply with our standards, and, or similar standards at least, and we cannot have different standards for products produced by EU and non-EU fishing vessels. And of course, EU efforts to make fishing sustainable in the European Union are incompatible with this policy and with these gaps. So EuroPECH is urging policymakers to make the necessary changes in legislation in order to address these problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that actually brings us to our last topic of the day, the effective control of EU waters. And we have two representatives here today, one from the national level, one from the European level. So it's Madame Bérangère Laurence from the French Maritime Fisheries and Agriculture Department and Mr. Santos from EFCA. And right, I think the order is Mr. Santos first and then Ms. Laurence. And if I may ask both of you and also Ms. Arena, if you could please have an eye on the time so that we still have a chance to discuss. That will be moderated by Mr. Strauss-Sanch at the end. Okay, so Mario, you may start. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Gord. And let me start with a word of thanks for this invitation and also extend it to the members of the European Parliament. So my presentation today will try to give an impression of EFCA activities and how we can fit into this picture of a control regulation revision. Starting by setting the scene, as the previous speaker, I think we're all aware that when we have different management measures in place, we may have different control and monitoring options that may be more effective or less effective to implement those. Largely with the common fisheries policy and in particularly with the introduction of the landing obligation, there was to some extent a change in the paradigm, moving from a sort of a landing quota type of control to a catch quota approach. Our main tool for cooperation, the joint deployment plans, which I assume most of you are familiar, in this sense have contributed greatly to facilitate the exchange of primary fisheries and control data, which gave us a very solid basis for what we do in the context of a regional risk management approach. I'll go to that into some detail. But we also believe that an improved data management framework and the possible introduction of REM systems building upon these could ensure a continuous and more effective control and monitoring against these challenges. I mentioned the JDPs. These are mainly our cooperation tool with member states in which we aim at promoting compliance and a level playing field. Just on the map there, you have a quick overview on where we are running these joint deployment plans, ranging from international-based joint deployment plans, NAFO, NIAF, CICAT, to European ones, North Sea, Baltic Sea, Western Waters. Key values of these joint deployment plans encompass training, encompass exchange of information, promoting transparency, exchange of inspectors, all of that aiming at compliance and level playing field. Recently, as you probably heard, EFCA had the possibility of contracting an operational patrol vessel, which is now available under the joint operations for JDP coordination, but also for assist the EU in the context of our international obligations. And I think this is quite a particularly crucial tool when it comes to promote effectiveness, promote level playing fields, and the exchange of best practices between different control authorities. Data has been introduced, has been mentioned as a key issue by Madame Thomas at her introduction, and maybe just starting to give you the picture of where we stand now. It's quite interesting to see that already today in our joint deployment plans, when we speak about catch data, ERS, and geoposition data, VMS, we are already going to some extent beyond the principles of the control regulation of primary exchange between the flag and coastal states, and we are enabling with the joint deployment plans a full regional view independently of your flag and of the vessels. So anyone that participates in JDP, rather than having a snapshot of just the vessel situations of their corresponding flags or the snapshot in the position of the coastal state, can have the full view, promoting a much better basis for risk assessment and, of course, promoting the important element of transparency. Now, this is the starting point, but there is, of course, a possible way forward, and there's been discussions, particularly led by the Commission, on a strategy for data management at the EU level. and to what extent could we have a central repository of EU member states' primary fishery data, namely VMS and ERS, and control data, because of course the exchange of inspection reports, it's also quite prominent in that sense. EFCA has also been particularly active in this context, and we just recently concluded the implementation document for what could be an exchange protocol of electronic inspection reports. The access, of course, will be full access to member states and the Commission. There's also another important element when it comes to the international obligations of the EU. The EU has obligations towards RFMOs and under the fisheries partnership agreements. And I think one of, if I may say, weakness we have currently is the lack of a consistent global view of EU fishing activity worldwide. Being the EU a major fishing power, I think that will be required to a large extent. A bit of publicity for EFCA, in a way, I think we will be quite ideally placed to provide this general assistance to Commission and Member States in the context of data exchange and analysis. Madame Thomas mentioned this already in her introduction, and indeed I think we will be willing to assist in that context. Quickly, one important part of the proposal refers also to the potential use of REM, remote electronic monitoring, mainly when it comes to the control of the complexities of the landing obligation. Just to tell you that EFCA has been conducting a work with member states through a technical working group, which aims to define the technical specifications and minimum requires to ensure that standardization and level playing field is maintained in this area of work. So this is a complete technical work which puts in place what could be these technical requirements and gives guidance on how they could be then deployed at the different fleets. Just very quickly, these technical specifications are mostly aiming at what could be the minimum requirements for a standard REM system and other topics that cover, namely the installation, rules of operation, technical aspects related to data handling, analysis, system ownership, and cost estimates. This work is now actually being concluded now. We are close to have a final document which we'll present in April to our administrative board for final validation. I was asked by George also to give a very quick snapshot of our potential in context of the international activities. Our activities are in that context framed by the Common Fisheries Policy, Article 30, where EFCA specifically mentioned as a potential tool to assist the EU when it comes to the international obligations. We've been very active in the context of RFMOs through JDPs, through the supports to the Commission and the EU delegations and general assistance in comparison, and also direct support to third countries, always under the context of the Commission activities to support the EU delegation into meetings like with Norway, training requests on the Commission, the IU evaluation missions, assistance in cooperation, and the PESCAL project. The PESCAL project could be a good example on this type of activities when it comes to regional fisheries management organization. In this context, what we are doing in the West Africa and where we are supporting all these key values of our activity. Last but not least, training. Training is indeed, when we speak about compliance and when we speak about level playing field, training is something that jumps into the eyes. Most of our training activities have been addressed to member states officials. I say this because Madame Thomas, in her introduction, mentioned also this potential of having this, let's say, web-based platform where you could eventually assist also the industry when it comes to the understanding what are the regulations in place and so on. Most of you are familiar with the discard plans. And you know how complex they can be per each of the fleet segments. I myself, every time I have to consult them recurrently. So this is the type of work that indeed we could do. Currently, we have a lot of training in the context of our joint deployment plans. We are supporting training of member states, and we have some written material, training manuals, and also some video tutorials under this e-learning platform that could be, you know, a good seed for any such future development. Training activities are not also included in addressing EU waters. They are also there for non-EU countries in direct assistance of the Commission, and we have particularly focused in the context of GFCM countries, mostly around the Mediterranean basin and the Black Sea, but also in a set of West African countries where we have seen that really this is the type of experience where the knowledge level can very quickly increase and the cooperation links be further established. I hope I respected my time. I thank you very much, and I look forward for further discussion. Thank you.
Bonjour à tous et merci beaucoup pour cette invitation à cet événement. Donc Bérangère Laurence, je représente la direction des pêches maritimes et de l'aquaculture française et donc plus particulièrement le bureau du contrôle des pêches. Alors je n'ai pas de présentation spécifique, mais je souhaitais vous donner un aperçu de la façon dont s'inscrit l'administration française des pêches dans le cadre de la révision du règlement contrôle. Donc l'administration française considère la révision du règlement contrôle comme un élément positif qui permettra normalement d'apporter à la fois des simplifications, des évolutions de certaines dispositions lorsqu'on considère qu'elles sont nécessaires et une certaine clarification. Il y a pour nous trois éléments principaux dans la révision du règlement contrôle. Tout d'abord, une importante harmonisation des dispositifs de contrôle qui sont porteurs d'une simplification. Dans ce cadre, la direction des pêches françaises est favorable, comme l'a dit tout à l'heure Madame Thomas, est favorable à la digitalisation des déclarations, notamment de capture pour l'ensemble des navires. Elle nécessitera certes un travail important, notamment pour les autorités de contrôle, un investissement notamment technique pour les professionnels, mais à moyen terme, elle doit permettre de renforcer et d'homogénéiser les mesures de surveillance. Sachant que l'administration française est aussi apporte une attention particulière aux mesures notamment de financement qui pourraient être apportées pour les professionnels, notamment dans le cadre des fonds européens. La révision du règlement contrôle porte en elle également un certain nombre de simplifications, notamment avec la suppression de diverses dérogations telles que notamment les règles de pesée qu'il convient de souligner. Et d'autre part, en termes d'harmonisation, la France souligne l'importance qui est accordée à la mise en œuvre d'un système de traçabilité qui se veut exhaustif au niveau communautaire, donc à la fois interopérable entre l'ensemble des États européens et qui intègre également les produits issus de l'importation en provenance des États tiers. L'objectif étant à terme de disposer de l'ensemble des informations relatives aux produits de la pêche, donc y compris ceux provenant de l'importation. Et c'est aussi dans ce cadre que la France s'est inscrite et a toujours soutenu le projet d'informatisation, de digitalisation des certificats de capture qui est porté au niveau communautaire, notamment par la Commission. Le deuxième élément, en ce qui concerne la révision du règlement contrôle, c'est le renforcement de certaines mesures de surveillance et de contrôle qui sont proposées dans le texte actuel. Renforcement des mesures de contrôle qui sont légitimes sur certains aspects, qui feront l'objet d'une analyse attentive dans la mesure où elles nécessitent un investissement subséquent des États membres. Et je parle notamment de deux aspects. Premièrement, le contrôle qui est proposé, le contrôle continu de la puissance motrice des navires. Et aussi la proposition faite d'installation de caméras à bord de certains navires, notamment à des fins de contrôle de l'obligation de débarquement. Donc la direction des pêches françaises est attentive à cette proposition et considère avec beaucoup d'intérêt le fait qu'elle soit soumise à une identification préalable des risques et des caractéristiques précises des flottes qui sont concernées par cette obligation de contrôle. Et pour terminer, le troisième élément important de cette révision, c'est le renforcement notamment des mesures qui visent à assurer le respect de la réglementation. Donc toutes les mesures liées à l'exécution de la réglementation. Et je tiens à souligner l'importance de la centralisation qui est proposée par le texte actuel de l'ensemble des dispositions qui sont relatives notamment aux infractions graves et aux sanctions au sein du règlement contrôle, puisqu'avant actuellement elles sont dispersées entre différents règlements, ce qui peut poser un certain nombre de soucis en termes de mise en œuvre uniforme de ces dispositions. Et la France, l'administration française demeure attentive, par contre, sur ce point, à la répartition des compétences entre les États membres notamment et la Commission, en ce qui concerne la partie sanctions et infractions et sanctions. L'objectif étant effectivement de renforcer la mise en œuvre homogène des mesures d'exécution au sein de l'Union européenne. Merci.
Good afternoon, and let me start by thanking very much the Rapporteur, Madame Thomas, but also the other member of the Parliament for organizing this important event. I think that when looking at this room and the number of people and the diversified also background, age, and also employment of those around us, we can really understand how important is this measure, and also how many people and how many sectors it affects. So I think this is a very important signal, and it is very important that we discuss those things in a very open manner and we have an exchange of views. I can only concur with the presentation and the issues that have been highlighted with Madame Thomas in her intervention. They very clearly summarize what the intention of the Commission proposals were. She touched upon harmonization, she touched upon simplification, she touched upon the need of having better data, more reliable data, and that's also one of the reasons of the events today, of the event today. And I think that there is a lot of, there are many links between those issues. I mean, they're all interlinked. You cannot see them in isolation. For example, if we don't consider now the enforcement part, because we don't want to discuss about that, but harmonization and the fact of having a level playing field and a feeling of equal treatment by fishermen is very important to make sure that there is also buy-in of, a better buy-in by fishermen of certain measures. And I'd like to reconnect myself with what the member of the Andalusia region, his intervention and the green box. The green box was really a success. We saw it from your presentation, we saw it from the video. We had already a presentation in our digital workshop, the workshop that the Commission organized in December last year. And why was it a success? It was also a success because it applies uniformly to all the fishing sector. It does not discriminate between sectors, between fleets or among fishermen. So it is very important to make sure that the same rules apply in the same way to everyone. What is clear as well from that video, from your presentation, and from the workshop that we had back in December is that when it comes to new tools, new digital tools, user-friendly tools, and cost-effective tools for small-scale vessels, there is a lot out there. Many member states and sometimes even fisheries organizations have developed their own tools over the years. Many more tools are now being tested. And why have they done so? Because there was a need for those tools, because there was a benefit of having those tools. And in many cases, the EU funds, EMFF, have been used. So the technology is out there and is being used today. What we need to make sure, and that's something important for the revision of the control regulation, is that we don't have in future a proliferation of several different means of reporting, and possibly we can have a better cost efficiency by making sure that there is a sort of a harmonization as much as possible, also to help the national administrations, because otherwise, can you imagine every national administration defining and implementing their own different tools? So, but the technology is something that is there, and it seems also costs are not an issue. Of course, it will be necessary to have a good transition period for the implementation, also considering that there are many vessels that are concerned. We heard about the numbers, it's important numbers. Having better, more reliable data from the small-scale fisheries sector is also very relevant for traceability, to ensure traceability. If the data are not available, then the provisions under the traceability article cannot be met, cannot be complied with. So we have to see all those provisions as interlinked in the control regulation. There is nothing which can be seen in isolation without the rest. So the reason why we have also reinforced the traceability provisions is also in strict combination with the need of having better data. And I cannot concur more with the remark that was made on a better control of recreational fisheries. The Commission came up with a proposal to reinforce the control measures on recreational fisheries. It is a very sensitive area, it's a very sensitive topic, very complex, considering the number of vessels, the number of participants in these fisheries, the number of species concerned, but we believe that it is time to have a serious reflection on recreational fisheries, on the control of recreational fisheries, to have better data out there. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have a perfect control and monitoring of catches from commercial fisheries where we don't have reliable information on catches from recreational fisheries. And let me conclude on a couple of other points which have been mentioned by the French representative. Of course, as we are talking about fully documented fisheries, the objective of this conference today was to focus on small scale. That's my understanding. But when you talk about fully documented fisheries, it's very much, it's more than that. It is a range of measures, it's a range of tools that allow fisheries managers, regulators to control, to manage the fishery. And that's in the interest of the fishermen. So she mentioned in particular the proposal by the Commission to have a better control of the engine power, a continuous monitoring of engine power. The Commission is convinced that the current measures for the control of engine powers are not fit for purpose. They're not suitable to ensure a monitoring of this important metric established by the CFP. And the second point that she mentioned is the proposal to introduce on a selected number of vessels based on risk assessment, cameras, CCTVs on board of certain vessels for a control, to ensure the control of the landing obligation. So these are tools which will complete the information on fully documented fisheries. So you cannot have one and not the other. And And as I said, that's something that, well, it goes beyond the discussion today. So probably I'm touching upon something that I should have not, but I'm just doing it because Bérangère referred to the French position there. And then a last word on EFCA. I have to say that the Commission is very pleased with the work that EFCA has been carrying out and is doing. We have a very tight collaboration with EFCA. EFCA has been instrumental in implementing also several international obligations in the Mediterranean, for example. So without the involvement of the EFCA's patrol vessel, we would not have today certain measures agreed at GFCM. So we generally agree that the agency, whenever possible, should be reinforced. And when it comes to the management of data, that's something that we need to look at very closely, of course, bearing in mind that data, once are received, they're used for something. So, and they're used at various levels. The Commission is a big user of data. When it comes to quota management, for example. So it is important that together with the processing of data, there is also the necessary access to those data guaranteed. Thank you.
Okay, what can I say? I have 2 minutes. Before leaving, I enjoyed very much to be here. And so I will not lead the discussion because, in fact, I have to leave. Isabelle also has to leave. I don't make conclusions before the end of the game, and I think that the discussion will be part of the game. But I could understand that we can have, in fact, better and more reliable control on fisheries. The example that you have been given is that in this digital era, we can apply the systems of suivi, the follow-up of the boats with all the information that we get that on small-scale fisheries easily and usefully. And I learned also that the legislation has to be improved. And Isabelle Thomas said something here that says that she's rewriting the whole EC proposal. And that the things has to be put more sharply and clear on the new fisheries control system. Has to be a regulation harmonized across sectors and member states. And that, in fact, what can be interpreted from what Isabelle said is this was a directive disguised of regulation, and it has to be transformed in a regulation to not give that freedom. Finally, one thing, because I have to be fast, one thing that is out of control, apparently, and this is the ghost in the machine, is the recreational fisheries. It's growing. We live in times of leisure. We'll suppose we will be growing more and more, and we are not, in fact, controlling effectively what is being done by the recreational fisheries. And this issue comes time after time in different dossiers that we are confronting in the fisheries. Another thing, and we had here one big specialist on budget, that we have a budgetary problem, both for the European Commission, for the GMAR, and for EFCA. Yeah. And without better budget, we cannot make it evolve properly. Okay. Okay. So a message for French representation. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. We have really to leave. We don't want to lose the votes in our group. And thank you very much.
So thank you, Madame Thomas and Mr. Strauss-Sanch, and all the best for the vote. We have the room. I spoke wrongly in the beginning, not until 3, but until 2:30. And I don't know, for example, the Commission, Ms. Arana, do you have a chance to still stay to maybe take some questions briefly? Is that possible? Okay, and I hope that's okay for all the other speakers as well. So that we can now have a brief discussion. I'll try and hold that, no problem. So that now we have a brief discussion, and then afterwards a bit of a networking lunch, grab some food. I think everyone's ready for some food. So if I may ask the audience, everyone who's here, who has a question for any of the speakers, to please raise your hand, quickly say who you are, who you're with, and then ask your question if anyone would like to. Oh, yes, please.
Oh, hello. I have two quick questions, if I say. I'm David Bunt from the Sustainable Eel Group. So two questions. You suggested that there should be a single data management agency. I got a feeling from the discussions that EFCA might be that agency. Is that the proposal, or is that open at the moment?
Well, I think this question is more relevant for Madame Thomas, who left. But what I can tell you is that So this is more relevant for Madame Thomas, but the Commission didn't propose anything like that. So we didn't propose to have a data management agency. However, the amendments of Madame Thomas go in the direction of empowering EFCA for data management when it comes to fisheries data. So EFCA would be basically the hub to receive data and to process data. It's one of her proposals.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, there's been a lot of focus on boats and vessels, but quite a lot of fisheries are based on sort of hand fisheries. So, for example, shellfish are often collected by hand, and in my sphere, eels, certainly in the UK, eels are caught with hand nets. So I wondered, would these regulations cover hand fisheries as well as boat fisheries?
Well, that's something I can already answer, and indeed it's one of the questions and possible shortcomings that was raised by a couple of member states. Historically, I mean, all quotas, when we talk about quotas for fish stocks, are set for fishing vessels. So for catches coming from fishing vessels, and as a result, the whole legislation, including the control regulation, has been built around the same concept. For example, the fact of filling in a logbook, it's something for a master of a fishing vessel. So when it comes to commercial fisheries, the regulation as such is probably, there are some shortcomings in that respect to cover those areas, provided that they are important, but we realize that in certain member states there might be, especially small-scale fisheries.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else? Yes, please.
Bonjour, Antonia du WWF. J'ai deux petites questions assez directes aux autorités françaises, mais aussi à Europêche. Peut-être la première sur justement les catch areas dont vous avez parlé. Comment, disons, pour vous, quel serait l'idéal dans la précision de ces zones? Est-ce que ce serait par exemple les zones FAO plus précision IZ et haute mer? Ou comment voyez-vous cela? Et peut-être pour les autorités françaises, par rapport à la répartition des compétences, notamment sur les sanctions, en quoi peut-être la nouvelle réglementation permettrait une plus grande harmonisation, notamment pour avoir des sanctions peut-être plus dissuasives au niveau national? Merci.
Thank you very much for your question. I'll reply in English. We discussed this topic in the Market Advisory Council and in other fora. And, well, one of the amendments that we are proposing to the control regulation proposal is to include a higher level of determination when it comes to the catch area. And if I may read the article, because it was in the slide, so I understand that it was really small to read, but what we are proposing is that the relevant geographical area for fishery products caught at sea, conveyed by the area, sub-area, FAO Statistics Division in which the catch was taken, and a record of whether the catch was taken in high seas, in the RFMO regulatory area, or in a EEZ, in an exclusive economic zone. So that would be better defined when it comes to the origin of the product when we talk about the area. And of course, we need to update regulations with this idea, because in the IUU regulation, it's just the FAO area. It's really big, for instance, when it comes from Asia. So we have to have a better defined area in the system. And we also, when I refer to the marketing standards regulation, for instance, when it comes to the definition of the catch area, well, this is a regulation from '96, and it defines this catch area as where fishermen define by their own, like where the fishermen say, well, I was there, basically. So, yeah, we need to update the regulation in order to, I mean, we have a lot of technology today, so I think this is possible nowadays. Thank you.
Alors pour la partie infraction, sanction et la possibilité d'améliorer l'uniformisation d'application des sanctions, notamment au sein des États membres, je parle au nom toujours de l'administration française, je vais dire je, mais ça concerne la direction. Déjà un point positif dans le cadre de la révision du règlement contrôle, c'est la centralisation de l'ensemble des infractions graves au sein d'un même instrument juridique qui serait donc ici le règlement contrôle, donc le règlement 1224/2009, ce qui évite en fait de faire des allers-retours constants entre le règlement 1224 et le 1005/2008 destiné à lutter contre la pêche INN. Au-delà de cette centralisation des infractions graves, la liste en fait de ces infractions graves est quand même renforcée. Et l'intérêt, c'est qu'à partir du moment où une infraction a été définie comme étant grave par la réglementation communautaire, dès lors qu'elle a été constatée, elle s'impose, et donc l'attribution de points parce que l'infraction grave a été constatée est obligatoire. Un autre élément dans le cadre de la révision du règlement contrôle, c'est l'introduction de critères d'appréciation en fait, du préjudice notamment qui a été porté en cas d'infraction, et de critères minimaux en ce qui concerne le calcul de la sanction qui est introduit dans la révision du règlement contrôle. Donc ça, c'est un autre élément. Ces critères d'appréciation existent en ce qui concerne notamment la réglementation française, puisque le bénéfice retiré d'un éventuel comportement délictueux est pris en compte au moment de la décision de sanction, qu'elle soit administrative ou pénale. Et ensuite, je finirai là-dessus. Une autre piste d'amélioration qui pourrait être envisagée dans le cadre de la révision du règlement contrôle et qui avait déjà été portée par la France depuis plusieurs années, c'est l'harmonisation des critères d'appréciation qui sont laissés aux États membres dans la caractérisation de certaines infractions graves, puisqu'il y a une liste d'infractions graves qui peuvent être caractérisées qu'à partir du moment où certains critères ont été définis, et ces critères sont laissés à l'appréciation des États membres. Voilà. En espérant avoir répondu à la question.
All right, thank you both for your answers. I see one more raised hand over there. Yes, please.
Oui, bonjour. Elisabeth Druel de Clienters. J'ai une question qui s'adresse principalement aux autorités françaises, à la représentante de la Commission et aussi aux représentants de l'Andalousie. Donc dans la proposition de la Commission, on voit qu'on essaye de passer à un système plus complet de suivi des navires de pêche artisanale. Et lorsqu'on en discute avec des représentants des États membres, on nous répond souvent que ça va représenter une charge administrative supplémentaire. Et je me demandais si vous aviez une réponse à cela, et si également on pouvait avoir un retour d'expérience sur ce qui s'est passé en Andalousie, et si ça a représenté effectivement une charge supplémentaire, ou au contraire si ça a aidé à simplifier le système. Merci.
All right, who would like to go first? Any takers? I think, okay. Nicolás.
A ver, yo lo único que puedo decir con respecto al sistema que tenemos nosotros, evidentemente todo puede ser mejorado. Estoy convencido de que se puede mejorar y se puede simplificar. Pero sí es cierto que ya existe un sistema que se puede comprobar, que sabemos la utilidad que tiene, la importancia que tiene, no solo desde el punto de vista del control puro y duro y de seguimiento de la flota, sino de las múltiples posibilidades que tiene. Es decir, yo le doy mucho más valor a esas posibilidades porque justamente cuando empiezas a trabajarlo con el sector, cuando hablas de control siempre hay un problema en el sector. Vamos a ser claros. Tú hablas de control y todo el mundo se le pone la piel como escarpia. Ya va. Pero eso no es. Eso no es. Cuando tú le haces partícipe porque ven que el sistema que le estás colocando le da otras muchas posibilidades para mejorar sus pesquerías, para buscar una mayor rentabilidad. Porque el sector artesanal cada día, en general, pero yo creo que el artesanal cada día tiene aquel concepto que adoptamos nosotros allá en el sur, se trata de pescar menos y vender mejor. Ese concepto que empezamos a acuñar hace años nos llevó a que con todo esto hemos logrado, tenemos 17 especies diferentes etiquetadas individualmente, en la aleta caudal la mayoría, otras no se pueden. Y eso les lleva pues a ver que es importante porque el control no está reñido solo con sanciones. El control va acompañado de una mejora de la gestión y va acompañado también pues de una mayor rentabilidad, que es lo que a la postre les interesa, porque ese triple equilibrio de sostenibilidad del que parece que vamos a pasar casi de puntillas en este periodo de la PPC es mucho más importante de lo que parece. El sector pesquero, si bien no ha podido aplicar los fondos estructurales como se tenían que haber aplicado porque ha sido un problema de principio a fin, no cabe duda de que ha entendido mejor que nunca que la sostenibilidad del medio, la sostenibilidad económica y social de sus pequeñas embarcaciones, de sus empresas familiares, es posible y el control es sumamente importante, porque no es ajeno a mejorar esa rentabilidad. Es lo único que puedo decir. Y luego, que los avances tecnológicos nos pueden posibilitar mejoras y simplificaciones en los datos y en la manera de obtener los datos. Absolutamente seguro de que puede ser. Y la disponibilidad nuestra de colaborar con vosotros para que todo el mundo entienda que es posible. Y Andalucía, bueno, pues podemos ser ejemplo de mirarnos para ver qué podemos también nosotros mejorar en ese intercambio con vosotros.
All right, I believe the question was also asked to the Commission and the French representative, if you'd quickly like to go.
Well, I think, I mean, it's a question, you refer to the member states. I mean, what member states authorities are saying, so, I mean, I cannot talk for them, but my take from the discussion so far and also from the digital workshop we had in December is that certain authorities are a little bit concerned about the additional work that, for example, the tracking of vessels might mean for them, especially when they have big fleets with vessels below 12 meters that today they're not monitoring at all. So, of course, it is a legitimate fear, and it's a question that they have to ask themselves. But of course, it has to be balanced with the fact that the need to monitor and control that part of the fleet and the added value and the benefit that we heard, for example, for Andalusia. On the other hand, there is also a clear recognition that in certain cases there'll be no additional administrative burden. On the contrary, reduced administrative burden. Take, for example, those cases where vessels today submit paper logbooks, even those cases where the administrations decided to go beyond the current rules, so they require already logbooks for vessels below 10 meters. In those cases, it will be much, much easier with an electronic tool of reporting, because I mean, everything that is on paper needs to be understood first. It needs to be written and transferred into a database. And this means a lot of work. You have to collect the paper in every port. They have to be sent to the central administration. So in terms of workload, that would be a reduced workload for the administration. But of course, it's always on a case-by-case basis. So every national situation or every regional situation is different. And then there is a concern for the operators themselves, because, of course, the fisheries administrations are those that talk to their fisheries associations, to the sector, so they also perceive the skepticism sometimes and the fear from the sector. And one of the comments that we got is that in certain cases, for example, when you have a very small vessel, when there is only one operator on board, when there are harsh conditions, it might be difficult for that single operator to provide information, the logbook data before landing. This is one other recurrent concern that we hear, but it should be limited to certain, I mean, really very small vessels and certain conditions.
Je vais juste apporter quelques mots supplémentaires, mais bon, la plupart des éléments que j'allais dire ont déjà été dits. Effectivement, le fait de passer à une digitalisation, que ce soit des moyens de surveillance ou des obligations, notamment de déclaration, certes, dans un premier temps, il y a une charge administrative supplémentaire à la charge des États membres, et effectivement, dans un contexte où, évidemment, c'est inutile que je le dise, mais je vais quand même le dire, les ressources publiques ne sont pas extensibles à l'infini. Cependant, est-ce que cette charge administrative initiale est supérieure à celle que nous avons actuellement en ce qui concerne notamment ce que vient de dire la Commission, la collecte notamment des obligations déclaratives, enfin, des déclarations papier qui sont faites par les professionnels, qui impliquent, par exemple l'exemple de la France, un suivi par au moins 1 à 2 personnes dans chaque département littoral, puis l'intervention d'une équipe d'une dizaine de personnes qui sont obligées de saisir l'ensemble des informations dans une base de données. Bon, je pense que le rapport coût-avantage est quand même peut être positif si on passe à des déclarations électroniques pour tout le monde. Donc c'est un petit peu aussi ce qui a motivé la position de l'administration française sur ce point, sachant que parallèlement, de toute façon, on avance aussi, donc en parallèle de cette révision du règlement contrôle, sur des dispositifs nationaux pour le moment qui permettront à terme de faciliter les déclarations, notamment via smartphone, par exemple pour les petits navires.
Okay, thank you. There is actually a question that has come in from Twitter for EFCA. It's from Beck Hubbard, the program director of Our Fish. Our Fish, full disclosure, of course, one of the organizing NGOs here. Unfortunately, Beck couldn't be here with us. So, Mario said a level playing field in monitoring and control is often called for by member states and by fishers. And does the EFCA believe that a risk-based introduction of technologies, such as the green boxes and REM, through the control regulation, could address this?
Yes, thank you for that question. Yes, as in all operations that we are managing, a risk-based approach is a crucial element in order to make sure that we are addressing the appropriate threats and that we are giving it the proper level of response. Obviously, and I think this is the tone of the Commission proposal when we speak about the REM, which I think was mentioned in the question. Indeed, the idea is to have a risk-based approach in which we could address the elements where this could face, we could have more issues, for example, related to the non-compliance with the landing obligation. There was initially a proposal by the Commission also when it came to the specific control and inspection program that this risk mechanism could be established in that context. I'm not entirely sure what's now the current level of thinking, if this is something that should be defined in the control regulation or could be defined in the context of the specific control and inspection program. Maybe Francesca can give us a bit more insight there. But I think the message will be that whatever the approach is taken, EFCA will indeed be ready to facilitate the process. Currently, we are already doing a risk assessment by fleet segment in the context of the landing obligation, and we'll also be ready, like in the development of our technical guidelines, to further identify, for example, issues such as vessel size and what will be the technical implications to give a better, adequate response.
All right, thanks. I don't know, Ms. Arna, do you want to sort of address what Mario referred to?
But just to recall that the whole control regulation and also especially the activities, the control activities by the member states are based on a risk management approach, and we are not changing that concept. So the concept is there, and it's being implemented by EFCA when putting in place with the member states the joint deployment plans. We have also incorporated the same concept when coming forward with a proposal for the control of the landing obligation, because obviously you cannot imagine that you can place CCTVs and cameras on board of all vessels. So you have to have a criterion, and the criteria there is what is the level of risk of this card. So we are very grateful for EFCA for undertaking an important work there, and hopefully we'll soon have some results. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else with a question for one of our speakers here? So actually, if I just may have one more follow-up question for EFCA, seeing as though you made all the way through half of Europe here to be here today, and that relates to the issue of data. So in terms of the differences between the current level of data that you receive, where do you see gaps that could be improved or sort of get rid of through the control regulation? Are there any things that come to your mind in terms of the data that you already have, but where you think, well, actually, for EFCA to do a better job to control your waters more effectively, we should be having also data XYZ?
Thank you, George. Well, actually, I think what I was trying to establish today also in my presentation is that we have a fairly good starting point. I think today we have achieved the full exchange of catch data through ERS. Today we have a full exchange of VMS in a quite transparent manner. This was not the case when I started at EFCA. I always remember when I started that we were discussing with member states the exchange of historical VMS data beyond the agreements of the control regulation. And by then, member states were extremely protected. So there has been a significant change in the approach in which these things have been doing. One of the challenges relates to the integration and the intelligent analysis of this data. As you probably be aware, EFCA is also cooperating with EMSA in the context of FKMX, often known as MARSURF, where different sources of geoinformation are integrated and can be comparable and promoted in a fairly automated way, a good basis for risk assessment. This is one of the tools where you have this integration done, but obviously there's more space. And there's also a clear mandate for EFC in that context, because basically we are facilitating all the risk management processes and even promoting best practices when it comes, for example, the establishment of guidelines for inferring compliance indicators. We had just recently concluded a consultation with member states in that respect. We have a series of compliance indicators that can be used not only for the benchmarks of the SCIPs, of the specific control and inspection programs, but probably more importantly, this analysis basis can be used also for targeting and for direct risk analysis of potential vessels. Just before concluding, briefly, to mention the international domain. That's probably an area where at the EU we may be in a weaker position. It's not easy to have a central view in one shot of the different, what's the EU presence across the world. Different RFMOs may have different ways of exchanging data. Also for us, we are facing these difficulties even sometimes in context of NIA, for example. And I think that's an area where a more comprehensive strategy could bring direct benefits. Being the EU a fishing power, I think that's what a major fishing power, that I think it's something that will benefit us all and could be framed then in giving us a better position for the fight against IUU worldwide, for unfair competition that maybe the EU fleet may be faced upon with, and all of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? I don't believe so. So we have another 7 minutes where we can plunder the rest of what's left from the snacks. I would really like to, although they're not here anymore, I'd like to, of course, thank our hosts, Ms. Thomas and Mr. Serrão, as well the Intergroup on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development for the organization. A particular special thanks to all the speakers who've made their way here today. So Ms. Arena, Ms. Laurence, and Mr. Fernandez Munoz, Mr. Waffes, and Mr. Sanch, and also everyone who has attended this event. Thank you very much. If you want to find out more, either grab a bag, please, with all the different fact sheets from the NGO Coalition, or leave your email. There is like a little sheet, and we'll email you interesting links also to an REM video, which we didn't get to show today, unfortunately, because the event was cut short. But yes, so sign up. You'll find out even more interesting content. And yes, also everyone watching online, bye-bye. Thank you very much to the interpreters who've, basically allowed these events to occur in various languages. Thank you very much. And lastly, thanks to everyone who helped preparing this event. Thank you and have a good day.